Good. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Jenkins, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Three Actions to Lessen Loneliness and Boost Belonging at Work. And my partner in crime, Stephen Van Cohen, will likely be joining us towards the end of our time. But a quick housekeeping items. Today's content is powered by Sync Learning Experiences. We design professional development training for businesses, and we do that in the form of LMS courses, live workshops, custom L&D solutions. And we've noticed that most training is neglected, disliked, and forgotten. And so our content, our training is actually used, enjoyed, and applied. And we've had the pleasure of working with some of the most world-renowned, best-known organizations as seen here. So a little bit more information on that on the back end. If you don't know me, I'm Ryan Jenkins, and I'm a keynote speaker and trainer. I've written a couple of books on generations. My latest book, the Gen Z Guide, is what got me interested in the topic of loneliness. A few years ago, I was researching that book. I discovered that Gen Z is the loneliest generation, and that's what started my journey on unpacking loneliness and how to start helping Gen Z, and now really all generations, with mental health challenges in the workplace. Our work's been featured all around the World Wide Web. And I also host a podcast called the Future of Learning and Development podcast. We interview Fortune 500 leaders in the learning and development space. So if that's of interest of you, give us a subscribe, and would love to have you tune in there. Some great content. And then lastly, I live in Atlanta, Georgia with my wife, Ash, and our 3 kids. And I'm so thankful that you took your precious time to spend it with us today. Now let's get into the content. So did you know that 61% of American adults report they're lonely, which is a 7% increase since 2018? Secondly, 50% of people in 1985 said they had a close friend at work. By 2004, less than a third did. And lastly, 75% of people say that they're feeling more socially isolated since the outbreak of the pandemic. I don't think that last statistic would surprise any of you, but it gives us some good context nonetheless, considering that we are now distancing ourselves from people, and thus loneliness is intensifying. So lessening loneliness takes a less effort than you might think. In fact, it just takes 40 seconds, the number 1, and 5 minutes. I'm going to tell you exactly what those numbers mean and exactly how little effort it can take to move from connected to loneliness. At the end of our time, you'll be able to know each of these numbers. So stay tuned. Some more housekeeping items. Here's where we're going to go. We're going to talk a little bit about loneliness, give you a high overview. Then I'm going to give you some specific strategies to lessen loneliness and boost belonging, whether that be amongst yourself, personally, professionally, as well as how to lessen the loneliness among a team. And then we're gonna do a recap. We'll have a game, and then we'll do some Q&A as well. And plus, you're gonna get all of the copies of today's slides, so don't feel like you have to screenshot or copy all this down. You're gonna get all this, as well as all of our contact information. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be doing a virtual competition at the end. The winner gets a copy of my latest book. Again, spoiler alert, Gen Z is the loneliest generation. All right, we're gonna do some live polling as we do in every one of these webinars. So pull out a internet connected device. I would recommend your phone, but you can open up another browser on your desktop if you choose. And go to this link, pollev.com/live poll, pollev.com/live poll. And I'm gonna be playing along with everyone as well. And here's how it's gonna work. When I prompt the polling slide, you'll simply see the question and the potential responses, or you'll see the instruction and you'll actually interact directly with your device, and we'll see your results live on the screen. So let's jump to our first question, which is simply, where are you today? Of course, I'm coming at you from Atlanta, Georgia. That wasn't a very good pin. Some of you may have to pinch in on this map to make sure that you're in the, you get the right pinpoint here. But I love starting here. And of course, if you're joining us internationally, just pinpoint out there in the ocean somewhere to figure out the closest direction. Or if you're in Canada, yeah, wherever the closest spot would be on that map. But it's always a nice reminder, right, that even though we're so far removed from each other these days, technology is still incredible how it connects us, even though we're time zones apart, sometimes halfway world apart. I also am curious about this question as it tees up our conversation. How often do you feel a sense of loneliness? So this is you personally. What is your personal sense of this? And I should have mentioned that all of these responses are completely anonymous. You noticed you didn't have to put in any information when you went to that link. So this is all anonymous. So I'm just curious, and the more transparent you can be, the more helpful this time will be for all of us together. All right, so it looks like, wow, overwhelmingly, most of you say daily, followed by weekly and rarely ever are tied. Very interesting. But overwhelmingly, looks like 3/4 of you are somewhere in a month or less. This is typical of what we're seeing these days. In fact, in some certain industries and certain spaces that we're offering this program, it's even higher than this. But this is a good starting point. And oh, there we go. Weekly outtook rarely ever. All right, so very good. And then lastly, the last question before we jump into more content here is I'm curious, how do you think, what goes in the blank here? Blank is how much loneliness can shorten a person's life, which is equivalent to blank. If you're just now joining us, you can visit that link at the top, and that'll take you right to the poll where you can join and chime in live. If you're watching this as a pre-recorded version, hello from the past. I hope the future is brighter than it is today. You, of course, won't be able to chime in live, but the interaction from the folks during the live session and these data points should be interesting nonetheless. So it looks like most of you think it's 5 years. I'm drinking 5 alcoholic drinks a day. And actually, the correct answer here is 15 years, which is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. That's how detrimental loneliness is to our health. And so we'll give you a little bit of context on why that's happening here in just a little bit. But let's really zero this down into the pandemic and loneliness right now. There's a paradox that's happening amid this pandemic. So let me explain. When disaster strikes, most people get scrappy and will fight for toilet paper. Have you seen that to be true? I think we all have. I think we've all seen those interesting and hilarious yet sad videos where this is happening. But if we just look at these videos or just watch what sometimes the media will over sensationalize, this isn't actually true. Most people don't go in this direction. What's actually true, according to research, is when disaster strikes, most people pour out of their homes to help others. That's what's actually true. And we don't have to look at it too far back as any natural disaster, right? Or when anything else, you think about 9/11, all these other people actually show up for other people when disaster strikes. So the paradox of the pandemic here is that even though we have more in common with others than we normally do, right? Because this is a global pandemic, we have something massively in common with every other human on the planet because this is impacting all of us. So now we have more commonalities than ever before, which should bring us together. Yet we have to go in the opposite direction of our instincts, which is away from others. And unfortunately, loneliness ensues. So this is, loneliness isn't a new thing, but my goodness, it has become, the pandemic has put a spotlight on it. And some of the more and more research that's coming out, more of the science that we're understanding about loneliness, it's drawing more and more of our attention, and it requires more and more of our attention. So we should have started here, but let's take a step back and define loneliness. It's simply the absence of connection. Someone who's surrounded by people may still feel lonely. I'm sure many of you have experienced that. I know I have myself. So it's not the absence of people, it's the absence of connection, deep connection. And a connected world that's leaving so many feeling disconnected is counterintuitive and it's troublesome, and yet it's our new reality. And this is very jarring. It's very confusing, right? When we take a step back and think about this. Well, we're more connected than ever, yet so often we're feeling more disconnected than ever. So why is this occurring? Well, let's look at some of the modern causes of loneliness. We've identified 6 of them, and I'll just briefly touch on the 6 of them. Then I'm going to ask you what you feel is most apparent, or what what's the biggest contributor to loneliness? So the first is demanding work. We prioritize productivity and professionalism over relationships. Secondly is dependency shift that's occurred. Info is now decentralized, allowing humanity to individually seek help and or knowledge. So for example, if something broke, let's say your faucet in your home, in the past, you would perhaps go over to a neighbor's, or maybe you would call a sibling or friend or a parent, and you would ask them how to fix it or what tools you might need. You might ask your neighbor what tools do they have, or have they ever dealt with a similar issue? And there was an opportunity to connect with someone else in that instance. Now, if something breaks in your home, most of you will just fire up YouTube and watch a video and address that concern in your house. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's probably more efficient use of your time. But that's the dependency shift, right? To where information is no longer centralized in a neighbor or a parent or an institution. Information is now decentralized, and so we can access it. So essentially, we're trading convenience for connection. Mobility, more mobility has caused people to invest less in relationships. We're gonna have to really watch this one carefully, as more and more people don't have to work in the same location as their ideal employer. So we can really move around and continues to move around as we come at the end of this pandemic, as more flexibility is woven into our working lives. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. The next one is technology and social media, reduction in quality interactions through distractions or by lower quality online connections. Next one is work-life balance. Today's always-on work culture leaves little time to pursue and nurture connections. And lastly, immediacy, opting for swift transactional digital relationships over long-term relationships. So these are the 6 major modern causes of loneliness. So now I want to ask you, what do you personally believe contributes most to yours and or others' loneliness? Again, if you're just now joining us, you can visit the link at the top of this slide and you'll be able to chime in live. All right, looks like the winner here is always on work culture, followed by tech and social media. I think this is the first time I've seen where technology and social media has not been the clear winner. Usually that is overwhelmingly the top response. But again, this is your personal preference, so no right or wrong answer here. But most of you are saying always on work culture. All right, let's talk a little bit about the business impacts of loneliness. So lonely workers are twice more likely to miss a day of work due to illness. They're 5 times more likely to miss work due to stress. They're twice as often to think about quitting their job and more inclined to believe their work is lower quality. These are not good things, right? All not good things. And I should mention, although it's could be fairly obvious, lonely workers are also more likely to be remote workers. So if that's true of lonely workers, then non-lonely workers are dependable. They're more productive, they're more loyal, they're more focused and confident. And this is, of course, where we'd like to move ourselves, to move our teams. So yes, by addressing loneliness at work, we can really fuel productivity, we can fuel engagement, we can fuel more satisfaction at work. So quick overview about the science of loneliness. Recently, there was a research done where people were put through an experience of exclusion. They monitored their brain, and of course, their brain lit up during that experience of exclusion. And in fact, it lit up right about there. So they had exclusion, they experienced exclusion, their brain lit up. And here's what was interesting. It was the same part of the brain that registers physical pain. So the same part of the brain that registers exclusion also measured physical pain. So we can deduce from that being excluded is felt the same as being physically hit. And even being excluded from a group that we don't respect is still harmful and painful, according to the research. So of course, if we are being excluded, right, if we're feeling lonely, we're experiencing that the same as if we're in physical pain. So of course, we're not going to be able to bring our full selves to work. Of course, we're not going to be able to focus on our customers and clients. Of course, we're not going to be fully innovative and creative at work. So yes, by addressing loneliness, we can, again, see a boost in not only our mental health and our physical health, but productivity, engagement, satisfaction at work. So if you experience loneliness, then that means your brain works. Loneliness is a hard topic to discuss because we take it personal. If we feel loneliness, it feels like we have personally or have failed ourselves in some form or fashion. And that's just not true. If we're feeling loneliness, it just means our brain is working. We were wired for connection. So our brain is nudging us, telling us, hey, go find community, get connected, focus on others, or do some of the strategies that we're about to do here. But no shame in the feeling or sense of loneliness. It just, bare minimum, means your brain is working. All right, my friends, we talked about loneliness. Now let's move into some specific strategies that can help you lessen it and boost belonging. And let's start with this poll. People who score in the top 10 percentile of happiness surveys do this more than people who had average happiness levels. What do you think? All right, now a trick question here. It is, as most of you figured, spending time with others. The most happiest people on the planet spend time with others. They socialize. So our first strategy to lessen loneliness and increase belonging is to socialize smarter. Socializing outside of work, whether that be happy hours or company parties, a retreat, etc., while they can reduce loneliness, however, group conversations tend to stay shallow and people tend to talk about what they have in common, which is work. So overall, it's just kind of a Band-Aid, some of those socializing things that we have outside of work. One-on-one conversation, however, or doing an activity together is more likely to create deeper connections. So if we're going to create these socializing environments, we've got to bring up more intentionality with it in order to lessen loneliness. So here's a couple of good examples. In the UK, which, this loneliness is a global issue, of course, the UK companies have created what they call connection spaces, such as a chatty table or a friendly bench, where the expectation is for people to connect when present in those spaces. Is something like this going to solve loneliness? No, but it's a great indication. It's a great signal to you and the culture or the team that connection is important and that you're taking necessary steps to cultivate more unique connections. Second example, other organizations have created micro communities where people connect based on similar interests, such as running before work or salsa dancing. Employee resource groups, affinity groups are all very helpful to help people connect and socialize smarter. And lastly, a leader recently shared with us that she created a break Zoom room where anyone can join and connect with her one-on-one and have normal break room conversations, right? It's those moments right before a meeting or in the break room or conversing before lunch where we developed a lot of rapport and connections. And so we have to work a little bit extra harder, but we can still cultivate those environments in a digital world. And here's a great example of doing just that. All right, here's our next poll to lead us to our next strategy. 60% of people think they touch their phone 100 times or less per day. However, a typical user taps, touches, or swipes their phone blank times per day. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. The correct answer here is overwhelmingly, or I guess shockingly, 2,617 times. So that leads us to our next strategy, which is to focus on others. Gratitude and service towards others can lessen loneliness. Proactively look for ways to help others and or express gratitude. It doesn't take much effort to move from lonely to connected. It can simply take one text or one email to someone expressing your appreciation for their work. And I often get caught up in this, and I think it's a big misstep for folks wanting to lessen loneliness is that relationships don't have to be lasting to be meaningful. Even those small connections, those small interactions that we have on a daily basis can really boost our sense of belonging, our happiness, and lessen loneliness. So here's a good example on how to focus on others. Identify the beneficiaries of the labor. This is really specifically geared at work. So when we connecting the work activity to the person who directly benefits from the work creates more engagement, motivation, and it lessens loneliness. And how we do it is we ask why repeatedly. So here is how you identify the beneficiaries of the labor. You ask why. So let's say we ask a group of folks that clean hotel rooms. We'd ask, why do you clean hotel rooms? They say, because that's what my boss tells me to do. Ask why again. They tell you because it keeps the rooms from getting dirty. Ask why again. They have to dig a little bit deeper because it makes the rooms more sanitary and more pleasant. And why does that matter? One last why. And finally, they get to the crux of it because it provides a clean space for customers to relax and rejuvenate. They're able to now connect a straight line from the work they're doing to the people benefiting from that work. So how long does it take for loneliness to lessen during a two-person interaction? I think this is our last poll before I give you one more strategy, and then I think we jump into our virtual competition. Is it 40 seconds, 4 minutes, 40 minutes, 4 different interactions? And I think this is a smart bunch because I tipped my hand at the top of our conversation today with those 3 numbers that you're going to learn, or why, or how it's so easy to lessen loneliness. And so, yes, the correct answer here is 40 seconds. You guys are paying attention. Bravo. All right, here's our last strategy is to prompt personal sharing. Create opportunities for individuals to share aspects of their personal lives with the goal of seeing the human behind the job. This is especially important as we're all virtual, or most of us are continue to be virtual. So virtual tours of home office is a good way to do this. Bring your kids or parents to work day. Carve out 5 minutes each meeting to have someone share a personal anecdote. And of course, bringing your kids or parents or pet to work just means dragging them from perhaps the living room into your home office at this point. But that idea of sharing a personal anecdote, I want to give you a good example here. Vivek Murthy, the 19th US Surgeon General, he created the Inside Scoop exercise where his team devoted just 5 minutes once a week during their all hands meeting, where one person would share pictures of anything they wanted. The only caveat was that it couldn't, as long as it was not related to their current job. So a colleague who was viewed as detail-oriented and nerdy, according to Vivek's team, it changed the way they shared pictures of them when she shared the pictures of her marathon training. And so she saw herself as an athlete, not just a researcher, and now all of her colleagues saw that too. So even though they were in a virtual setting, sharing this inside scoop, they now had this deeper connection. So when people feel seen at work, they are less lonely. So to cap off this idea of the power of sharing, many of you may recognize this image. This is Chris McCandless. He's an American hiker and subject to the book Into the Wild. And he sought out an increasingly nomadic and isolated lifestyle. He traveled across North America and eventually hitchhiked to Alaska in 1992. He entered the Alaskan bush with minimal supplies to live simply off the land. And if any of you have been to Alaska, you know, it is just breathtaking. And he wrote this: "Society, you're a crazy breed. Hope you're not lonely without me." He lived alone on an abandoned bus, which is seen in that picture, for 6 months until his death. And as he was passing away, one of the last words that he scribbled down, again, he's all alone, dying of starvation, and he's looking out at one of the most beautiful scenery in all of the world, and he penned this to paper. Chris said, "Happiness is only real when shared." So there he was. He was thinking he was trying to isolate himself from the world's troubles and the world's craziness. But what he discovered there is that when you're all alone, happiness isn't real, right? It's in the sharing of those moments that we really experience true joy And what's really is the big signifier that humans, we were connected, or we were wired for connection. So a great reminder, even though that story is so tragic, great reminder for the power of sharing. All right, my friends, let's jump into a virtual competition. So get your thinking caps on. But before we get there, how we can work together. Again, at Sync Learning Experiences, we create custom and or license our LMS courses, our digital courses. We also do custom projects. If you're thinking about digitizing your training materials or anything else from an L&D perspective, we'd love to jump in and see if we can help you there. But perhaps more specific to this content, we do workshops in person and virtual. And for loneliness, we help teams take a loneliness audit. We help them identify how to spot loneliness in themselves and or the team or their coworkers. And then we give tons of strategies as it relates to finding more engagement at work by becoming less lonely. So if that's of any interest or you want to explore this topic further with your teams, send me an email, ryanj@synklx.com. All right, now's the competition. Here's how it's going to work. We're going to use the same function, the same polling feature that you have been all day. You're going to answer correctly as fast as you can. The winner's going to receive a copy of my latest book. And just a quick note, when I prompt the competition and you jump in, you're just going to be assigned a random guest ID, and that's how you can track where you are on the leaderboard. So here we go. Question number 1 is, loneliness is the absence of blank. And I forgot to mention, but you just have 15 seconds to answer. So answer as quick as you can. So overwhelmingly, most of you got it, 92%. It is connection. So per usual, we have a multi-way tie. It's going to narrow quickly though. Here's your next question. Loneliness can be lessened in as little as blank. I fully expect a near 90%. Oh, 100% of you got it. Well done. Yes, bravo. Still time. Most of you have a perfect score. Here's your next question. I have a feeling this one's going to be 100% as well. Let's see. Bingo. All right. They're going to get tougher from here. I promise. Here's your next question. All right. Correct answer. Focus on yourself. Focus on others is the way to lessen loneliness. All right. Narrowing it down to 2 folks now. Anyone's game. Here's your next question. All right. Yes, I shared this statistic before I told you there was a virtual competition. So we normally weed out most folks here. So let's see. Yes, guest 336. I think there's 1 or 2 more questions. So there's still anyone's game here. Who is the most lonely generation? Correct answer, Generation Z. Most of you got it. Well done. All right, guest 336, still with a slight lead. And that's it, my friends. So guest 336, here's how you claim your book. Since you placed first, take a screenshot of the leaderboard. Usually you can do that by clicking both buttons on the side of your device, or you can take a picture of your laptop or tablet. Email the screenshot as well as your address to my email address that's shown there. And then lastly, I'll send you a book once you send me that information, and you can learn a little bit more about the loneliest generation. All right, so as I mentioned at the top of our time, this is how little effort it takes to move from loneliness to connected. 40 seconds is how long it takes for loneliness to lessen during a two-person interaction. 1 is the number of appreciative texts sent it takes to lessen loneliness. And 5 minutes is the amount of time it takes in a team meeting to share something personal. So really, it doesn't take much time to lessen loneliness amongst ourselves or our team, just some intentional thoughts and actions. All right, so we're going to do the polling via the polling. We're going to do the Q&A via the polling function. So you can submit your questions and then you can vote on whichever ones you'd like me to answer. And then Steve and I will be happy to address anything we can. I know we're up against our time, so if other folks have to jump, certainly understand that. Enjoy the rest of your day, but we'll stay on as long as there's any questions. But as a quick recap, you see the strategies that we shared there: socialize smarter, focus on others, and number 3 is to prompt personal sharing, which can happen in the form of a meeting. It can happen in the virtual Zoom breakout room. There's lots of different ways to prompt more personal sharing. All right, first question that we've got here: what role should business play in helping to lessen loneliness? That's a great question, and we get this one a lot because loneliness seems like a taboo topic that's reserved for your personal life and shouldn't be addressed at work. But it's our belief that work's the perfect spot to do that. And why it is because work satisfies the 2 things that people want most in life. In life, people want these 2 things. They want meaningful relationships and meaningful work. So our family can give us those meaningful relationships. Our hobbies can perhaps give us those meaningful work, but oftentimes it's work. It's where we spend most of our time outside of sleeping is involved in work, and we can create meaningful relationships and do meaningful work. And so we can, if we can show up there, and that's where we're finding most of the things that we want as humans, it's such ample opportunities for leaders and organizations to step in to create more inclusion at work, where people are able to lessen loneliness so they can fully show up and contribute at work. So we believe part of why this program has become one of the most popular programs of 2020, yes, of course, we're feeling more lonely with the pandemic, but this was something that was surging. Loneliness rates were escalating very quickly before the pandemic. And it's just because we're looking to connect. We want to have this sense of belonging. And since we're at work most of the time, outside of sleeping, what a great opportunity to create more cohesion, belonging in the workplace environment. And one of our goals through this program is to normalize the conversation around loneliness. Because again, there's just so much stigma around loneliness. It's a sense of personal failure when we talk about it or feel it. And we want to start normalizing it so we can address it head on, and work's a great spot to do that. Steve, did you have any thoughts on that question?
Ryan, you covered it in great detail, my friend. So I think that's good. I like this next one. How do you convince leaders who say this is too personal of a topic that this is an important work topic? All of the statistics that Ryan shared throughout that entire presentation are really, really good statistics to help create some context. But what's important to remember is there's a difference between like having one-on-one conversations like a therapist would, to say, hey, like, are you lonely and why are you lonely? Tell me everything that's creating your loneliness, right? Like, that's not necessarily what we're recommending. The things that Ryan talked about is taking time to like get to know the person as a person. It's all about making them feel seen and heard, right? It's about doing those little tiny things that create those moments of inclusion that everyone across the organization, especially leaders, should be doing if they want to have the right relationships with their employees. So when we think about this being a too sensitive or too emotional or a topic that just should not be discussed at work, the reality is the solutions that we've recommended are really straightforward, and leaders can all do them pretty easily. And we can steer those conversations in the right lane to get people to buy in and actually focus on, lessening loneliness. So that would be my quick recommendation. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I think, great point, Steve. What people need now more than ever is presence, right? Just get the sense that I'm with you, right? That's why some of us are struggling with these devices, right? Because they're so new to human behavior. And right, we've all been there. If you're in a meeting or if you're at dinner with friends or family and this device is on the table or someone is using it, it immediately severs that connection, right? You feel like that person's not there anymore. And so constantly we're craving more presence from the people that are around us. And so to Steve's point, this isn't about therapy. This isn't about, really solving tough mental health challenges. It's just about knowing that, hey, loneliness is very real, but it's also very accessible in helping others overcome it. And a
Yeah.
big portion of that is just helping, just being a little bit more present in the time being. The other thing I'd mention too is that oftentimes our brain is steering us wrong in this conversation. There's some really interesting research out there by Nick Epley, who studied people riding on the train into Chicago, is where he first did the study. And he asked people to start connecting more, he created three different trains. One, people were supposed to keep to themselves. Another one was they were supposed to do normally what they normally do, and they just kept to themselves. But then the other one, he actually asked people to create a connection with someone that they didn't know. And everyone thought that they would be happier keeping to themselves. But after all of it, the highest happiness rates were amongst the people that actually connected with one another in the train car. And he did this at taxis, he did this in the airports, he did this in medical waiting rooms, he did this everywhere. And so what we found is people often think it's going to be awkward, think that it's too personal. I don't want to interrupt anybody else's day or what have you. And that's not the case. Actually, we are happier when we step into those moments for both the initiator and the receiver, as the research found. So back to this question of is it too personal of a topic? I would say no, because again, that's our mind thinking, no, this is reserved for outside of work. But I think that's our brain misleading us. The science actually tells us that if we step into this and find ways to connect more on a deeper level, we're all more fulfilled and happy. So keep that in mind as well.
So that kind of piggybacks into this next question, Ryan. How can people who work very independently better connect with others, or perhaps design their work to be more collaborative instead of only independent? I'll piggyback off of your story. I actually did this. I was on an airplane for the first time in a long time yesterday, and I just listened to that episode about connecting with strangers. And the woman who sat next to me on the airplane came in with her Bose noise canceling headphones, and I said, "All right, she obviously doesn't want to talk. She's got these headphones on, but I am going to follow the research." So I looked at her, and she can tell that I was looking at her, and she took off her headphones, and I just said, like, "Hey, where are you going? Like, where's your final destination?" And that one question, we spent 20 minutes having this really delightful conversation, and she was smiling and I was smiling, and it was awesome. So just knowing that you don't need to necessarily have the work connections if you don't have access to them, to feel that interpersonal relationship, that rapport, that kind of experience. So if you work independently, find other ways when you're waiting in line at a Starbucks, or when you're checking out at the grocery store, or when you are surrounded by all of the different people that you're surrounded by. Lean into creating some of those conversations. The other thing that I've been doing recently, I'm super extroverted. I work independently. Luckily, Ryan's a really good partner. So if I am needing some time to connect with another human, he's always available. But the other thing that I've been doing is I've been using LinkedIn to create very, very straightforward conversations with people that I don't know. So in learning and development, I've been connecting with people all the time who, reach out to me. Typically, you just accept, their invitation, and then nothing happens. Well, I've been messaging those people back with a very simple question: what are you working on that's exciting? And that's created some really good conversations back and forth that usually start via, LinkedIn Messenger, that eventually go into Zoom conversations. And in the last month, I probably talked to 15 or 20 different people in L&D, just talking about what we're both interested in. And it's been an awesome way to build some relationships and some rapport, because that fuels my extroversion tank, and allows me to continue to work independently. So that's what I've been doing. That's been working pretty well. Ryan?
Yeah, that's great. I'd say two other ideas. One is to find common or uncommon commonalities. Try to find more uncommon commonalities with people. So that's not just finding people that enjoy running, but people that enjoy ultra marathons, right? The more kind of specific you can get, the more that you're going to find these deep connections outside of work, right? And it's never been easier to find these groups of people, right? And to if people are gathering because they feel safe or whatever activity they're doing, they're able to be safe about it, pursuing those. So that's something to think about. Then the other thing to think about is how can you trade convenience for connection?
Mm.
Something I've been doing recently is instead of listening to a podcast on my way home, because oftentimes I get going again and my brain gets moving, it's hard for me to then transition into personal, dad mode. Is I'll call a friend and talk with them for a few, and that's been remarkable in obviously boosting happiness, but also getting me more prepared to transition from work to personal in the evenings. And then the last thing I'll say too, and I fall victim to this quite often, is if we want to go fast, we go alone, right? Because it's just you. You can make a lot of decisions. You can go fast. But if you want to go far, it takes a team because there's so many things that we're not capable of doing. And it takes other people around us to really fill the gaps, create bigger vision, and run the marathon versus just the sprint. I think that's it for us. Steve, any closing thoughts before we conclude?
No, thank you for doing all the work. I love just popping in at the very end to help answer a couple of questions. So you made it easy on me today, Ryan.
I was feeling a little lonely, but now that you're here, that's gone. So, all right, everyone. Well, thank you for your time and attention. We appreciate you. Anything else we can do to help, don't hesitate to reach out. Enjoy your day.